Hi, I'm Sumana Shrestha. I'm a member of Parliament in the House of Representatives. Since 2015, that has been in response to a social need that I've seen, a gap. For example, Carpool Kathmandu or Medication for Nepal or COVID Alliance for Nepal, all of these initiatives have existed to fill in a gap that I saw was hurting a lot of Nepali people. This particular jump to politics is also in response to what I saw in Nepal, which is we were not getting any changes in our representatives. It was always the same figures. It's always the same people who give very fluffy speeches but without very concrete. I, as a citizen, felt like it was not what we signed up for. When an opportunity arose to support a new platform, Rastriya Swatantra Party, to challenge the status quo, I took up the challenge. I think the first thing is a recognition that alone you can't do everything. It's also a recognition that you always need a team with diverse skill sets, with diversity in opinions and how we approach a particular problem, think about certain issue, brings in the best solutions we can with the given evidence. I think that particular aspect that is very, I guess, common in corporate world is something that I've been practicing. The other thing that I've been practicing is making sure there is something concrete. I mean, we need to earn our worth in corporate sector, right? The same thing in politics as well. I need to earn, well, I've gotten all the votes, but I need to earn it. Well, the first few days in Parliament, it was like first few days in classroom. Like I was ready to take notes when politicians spoke, and then there was a very stark reality that's like, all right, I have to charter my own course. I have to figure this out for myself. I had created my own terms of reference. Once I learned I was a member of Parliament, I was like, I need to make sure I do justice to all the votes that have been given to Rastriya Swatantra Party. I come from proportionate route. Sense of responsibility that also morphs into anxiety a bit. I was always there. But first few days into Parliament, I was like, all right, I just have to charter my own course. Well, in corporate world, the scope is much smaller. Right? You need to make profit, you need to deliver value to your very specific segment of customer that you're targeting. You need to create specific set of value for your client that you're working. But in public sector, it is optimizing for the largest number of people. In public sector, the reward comes from the knowledge that you've made somebody's life better. Like 5 years down the line, this little baby that is being born today is going to have a better future. So the reward mechanism is different kind of brain triggers that happens, I guess, in public sector. But if you ask me, from the ultimate value system is creating value for the society. That doesn't change. The right person to ask that question is Dr. Swarnim Wagle. He's the economist. But clearly there is a big divergence in macro indicators and micro indicators. This is something I've actually spoken in the full Parliament as well, that we have not taken care of our micro indicators. We just talk about macro indicators, but we are not thinking about industry specific. The first question I asked to the then finance minister was, what kind of stimulus package are we going to provide to our businesses? Because in the absence of that, there's not going to be, our employment numbers are going to plummet. If we don't have entrepreneurs working, if we don't have businesses that sustain, then how is any entity supposed to, how is a country supposed to survive, right? Bill Hackathon is a concept that is borrowed heavily from tech sector. In tech industry, one of the things we do hackathons. If you have a problem that you want to solve, you get a bunch of bright people, people who understand the problem, people who can articulate the problem, people who can express this is my pain point, and people who can think about creative ways of solving it. So Bill Hackathon is a concept where if there is a bill that gets tabled, then collectively we can make it better. It's also a concept that we really need to democratize democracy. Right now it's completely taken up by bureaucracy and it's limited to the members of parliament. This is one thing that really made me unhappy when I was a citizen. Like, laws get drafted and I felt there were times where laws were being drafted by people who didn't understand, who've never opened a business, who've never done anything except come and tell me you can't do this, you can do this. So I wanted to make sure as a parliamentarian, I was not carrying on that, I would say, feudalistic society, and making sure people have a say in the laws that are being drafted, they understand it. If they have a say, there is ownership, and also they become part of shaping society. So Bill Hackathon really is a concept of democratizing bills to people, and I am not yet fully satisfied with what I've achieved, because it's still limited to people who have internet access, who can know that, you know, I'm calling for amendments, I'm calling for opinions on a particular bill using internet. Ideally, it would float in community radios. Ideally, this would be discussed in fields by farmers, expressed in a very common language without using these legal jargons. Once the bill gets passed, this is what it means for you. This is what it means when it comes to, let's say, fertilizer. This is what it means for you when you're selling your produce. Or similarly, in at least an hour in a corporate business house where they discuss, there's a new bill coming and these are our ideas, and they come together to put it. There are a lot of issues that I, as a citizen, am not happy about in terms of service delivery. So those issues, obviously, they come as an experience from a citizen. Other issues, people email me, I learn about them when I am with the public, and they tell me. I learn about the issues when I'm trying to resolve one issue, then it connects to something else. I'm like, all right, there's a problem there as well. That's how issues get big. People write to me. It's a lot of interaction with public. Unless we fix the process, right? Like, you talk about the budget. The big ask I had, which I'm going to ask again this year, is why don't we get data in editable format? So not just me, not just members of parliament, everybody can run analysis, right? Why don't we follow simple framework of making sure there is collaboration between ministries, budgeting tools, that multiple layers of government can collaborate together? It feels a lot of things happen in silo. Right? And a lot of policies get made without evidence. These are process changes, and these are things that I'm very passionate about. It takes, if the process gets changed, hopefully we'll have better policies that actually address our problems. I think we need to make a massive move from this Jack Welch era of leadership to the leadership that's required now, which is more servant leadership. You serve, and that's the whole purpose that leaders exist. I think that's the big challenge. And until we move to this form of leadership, I feel there will still be a very top-down, we have to do this because I think so, versus we have to do this because this is what evidence show, this is what majority of people want, you know. So it's a different type of leadership that we need, and I think that's the vacuum area, that's the crisis area. Right? There are a lot of different organizations that diaspora community have formed. It's reaching out to them. Diaspora community does come together when Nepal faces crisis like floods and whatnot. Even if it's small amount, what I've seen is they want to give back. The biggest hurdle we have in terms of good governance is we've not really ever explained to people that when we talk about administrative state, it's the bureaucracy that's the permanent government. Nobody has really put efforts into shaping bureaucracy to be more service-oriented, right? There's a difference in Nepali term, no? It's sason versus I would really would like to turn that into seva. I think that's very important. And if you think about every politician, they've always talked about, oh, I am going to change. It's like, not you. Like, you need to tell me how you're going to change the bureaucracy. And in order to change the bureaucracy, you first need to change the laws, right? You need to give that culture to bureaucracy. We are service-oriented. Ultimately, democracy is not just a right to vote, right? It's a society in which we live in, where you and I, we have mutual respect for each other. We talk to each other with reverence. And that part is completely, I feel like, missing. Besides the cultural part of Nepal is a very nice society in general. Besides that part, we've not elevated ourselves when it comes to interacting with as state individuals. For example, I have big problem with the term mananiya, because I feel that's the first change we need to have, is closing that gap between lawmaker and for whom the laws are made. The first is that. Second is then figuring out what are the main changes to laws that needs to be made so that the bureaucracy treats the people separately, so the bureaucracy is incentivized to innovate. A very simple example, suppose you're going to Udyog Mantralaya with a very new idea. Are they going to say, oh, it's not in law, oh, because of this kanun you can't do it? Or are they going to have a team meeting, like maybe once every week, that talks about, oh, we have this very new thing that has come up. How do we go about serving this particular idea, this particular person? I think until we get to that point, tourism bill, for example, I think there was in 2035 BS, Bikram Sambat, it's been amended 6 times. For 3 times, the amendments were not material. It was, mathi altitude ma jane bhariyako shabda, they came up with kamdar. That's a nice word, but did we talk about insurance? Did we talk about meaningful thing that then gives that porter certainty, right? If I were to work these many years, if I were to work this many hours, if I were to get sick during the way, if I were to have a fall, what would happen? Those kind of thing. Now there is a concept of ethical tourism that basically takes this and turns it into a product, whereas it should have been a norm on its own, right? The other amendments have been Shri Panchko Sarkar instead of Shri Panchko Sarkar, Nepal Sarkar, Nepal Adhirajya, Nepal. And I'm like, all the politicians that talk big things about politics need first to evaluate, is the tourism bill or tourism act according to our aspiration. It has listed the kind of activities that is considered touristic. Kayaking is not in it. We don't have skiing. We don't have any thing that's new, right? So without that, what is the bureaucracy going to do? If you go with oh, I would like to do ABC something, if you like to do base jumping, for example, they will first say, oh, it's not in the law. And then what you would be required to do is then you need to find a politician who would then broker that arrangement, that somehow all of a sudden it becomes legal, right? Or you can do it. These are how I feel like bureaucracy has not evolved, because politicians have lied that it's not them, it's the laws that govern how bureaucracy is going to work, and they have not meaningfully worked into these laws. Well, I feel it's important for representatives to work for the people that he or she represents, that they represent, to truly work without any additional cost. So for example, if you had a business idea and you were stuck, you should be able to walk up to any of your representative and say, I need help in this. And they should not ask for kickbacks from you. That's the first thing. We need to reduce the cost of making things happen zero. Then that would, I guess, that would be the market approach, right? The other thing is, it doesn't happen, the corruption that we have right now, the monetary corruption does not happen in vacuum. It happens due to nexus of bureaucracy, politician, and businesses. But the language, the narrative in the country that's set up, everything gets called Dalal Pujivad, which is very wrong. I want every Nepali to be rich, but rich legally. I want every Nepali to have amazing quality of life. Because when they have amazing quality of life, that's when our society is better. That's when I am successful as a lawmaker, as a representative, right? We've got a very wrong narrative set that does not encourage entrepreneurs, that discourage, as if profit making is somehow bad. So we've got some of the laws that needs massive amendment, and we've got a bigger hurdle of upgrading our narrative. Well, I've not been in an executive position. It's hard for me to tell. So what I do evaluate it by is the experience I had when I was trying to do something, are the stories that people tell about this full audit, about the stories people tell when they are contractors, the kickback race. They are like, oh, there is something called PC. I thought that meant politically correct, and like, no, apparently it's project commission, you know. So based on these stories, it feels like we've really decentralized corruption. Then you don't even know who you need to bribe to get the job done. It's so like messed up. Well, you need to start working more with your parliamentarians. This is something I've said at every platform, which is anytime you need to get something done, you either go to the Sirsastha Neta thinking, oh, they will issue a whip and everybody will follow the line. Then the other thing that happens is everybody goes to ministry and then the secretary changes. You spend all this time to educate a secretary, joint secretary, and they get transferred. Or you spend a lot of time educating a minister and that person changes around, right? But your much more stable and permanent position are your parliamentarians. So if you were to educate your parliamentarians, if you were to work with them for specific changes, for evidence finding, to reach more people, that's a lot more stable way. I think we need to work more with parliamentarians. And private sector needs to heavily invest in supporting think tanks. Right now, as I've said before, a lot of laws get made without evidence. There's no rationalization of punishment, for example. Some, if you breach certain laws, some is in thousands of rupees of fine, some is in few lakhs. If somebody does something, e-commerce bill is an example of that. How can you think about stuffing an entrepreneur in jail, right? A leader must know why that person is in that position. If you ask me, monetary corruption is one aspect. I think it's morally corrupt to occupy your position and not do anything that the position is meant to do. I've taken an oath. Bureaucracy has taken an oath. People like me has taken an oath to serve nation and Nepali people. So if I were not to work on laws that would then ultimately impact your life, Nepal's future, then it is the highest form of corruption I can think. It's moral corruption, it's ethical corruption. It is worse than financial corruption. Because with financial corruption, at least you have laws that says you can investigate. But with this kind of non-action, what are you supposed to do? So I do not actually envision a situation where I will be on one side and party will be on the other side, because I'm involved in shaping parties' standpoints on a lot of issues. Person can explain in much more detail than I can. From my perspective, we need to work on this aspect quite a bit, because if you have bad niyat, if you don't have right intention, no amount of law is going to be able to capture that. First thing is we need to realize nothing is free. The very popular term in political sphere is to dangle the carrot of, oh, I'll do this free, I'll do that free. How are you going to make things free if you don't have resources to support that free? First is for public to be aware. Anytime somebody says this is free, that is free, oh, I will reduce your retirement age, I'll give you old age allowance like much earlier. The first question is, how are you going to support it? Because what that politician will end up doing is that that policy will just end up borrowing from your future generation to pay. And then you are not better off, because your kids will be in huge debt as soon as they are born. So we need to accept this, right? Nothing is free. And we also need to accept we want to create a society where the most vulnerable are taken care of. Therefore, I would first say we need to think about what's the best way of reaching to that segment that absolutely can't afford. Rather than saying, I want everything for free. Sure, if we had, if we had a tree that had money, that grew gold, would be able to, but we don't. We need to work very hard for that, and this is a part where I feel like politicians have been very, very unethical. Well, look, I've started working on those. I would like to evaluate, I don't know if this is exactly where you're getting at, a lot of nitigat, policy level corruption happens when we determine the Bhansar rate, right? The customs rate. I have been asking for data saying I want editable spreadsheet template format for all the Bhansar rates. So it's not just me, entire Nepal can do an analysis on it. I went to Finance Ministry to ask for it, they didn't give me. I've written a letter. We need to make sure we are clear on what items are considered luxury, what items are considered non-luxury, and what the tax regime is going to be. Ultimately, that's the manifestation of a society that is considered Samajwad Unmukh, right? The second is really to start having very healthy conversation on what education, higher education means, because I think it's been completely hijacked. The only thing when we talk about Ucha Shiksha in my Samiti is Prada, Professor Doctor. I'm like, is that it? That's not all what higher education is about, to just produce doctorate, people with DR in front of their name. It is to produce people who will critically question the decisions we are making, that will find the evidence to then guide us, saying you are not thinking about your punishment system in a rational way. Because in the absence of people who come out of this higher education, then the people who will go man these multiple agencies, right? It could be Nepal Tourism Board, it could be NTC, it could be NTA, talk about every agency. We want very capable people at the very top, and that human resource is going to be produced by higher education. So I am very concerned about higher education. And then the other area that I really want to work on immediately is making sure diaspora remains connected, be it via remote voting. That is also important for domestic workers that migrate internally. I think the number is 30% of labor force migrate internally for work, and they're unable to go vote because the cost is so high. And then people who go to Qatar, Malaysia, the people who are sustaining this economy should be able to vote for their future and their children's future, because it's the lack of opportunity that's kicked them out. It's a forceful migration for a lot of people. They need to have a say. They should have a say. It's a basic human right. I left Nepal 20 years ago in search of better education, better job prospects. My grandmother is now 94. She keeps calling for her eldest grandchild, who is not here, who is in UK. I envision a Nepal where that's not the case. I envision a Nepal that people have fair shot at life, and if they're going to move out of the country, it's because of their choice, not because they don't have opportunity.